Have you ever wondered why some women can leave a man restless in his own thoughts, unable to silence the echo of her presence, even when she says almost nothing at all? It is not beauty alone, nor the loud spectacle of charm, but something quieter, something the conscious mind struggles to name, yet the unconscious cannot ignore. It is the silent move, the act of withdrawing your energy, not in punishment, but in mastery. A move so subtle that it doesn't provoke his defenses, but rather awakens his hunger. For in the absence of your validation, a man meets the mirror of his own longing. This is the psychology of space, the archetype of the queen who does not court her subjects, they come to her. In Jungian terms, it is the magnetic pull of the anima when she refuses to pour herself into the bottomless cup of another's ego. It is the alchemy of turning silence into signal, absence into allure. Men are conditioned to chase, but the real pursuit begins when the game becomes internal, when his own shadow whispers to him at night, "Why do you want her so much?" The answer is not in what you gave, but in what you withheld. To understand this, one must see beyond the surface. Male desire, at its core, is not simply about physical need. It is about recognition, conquest, and the quelling of an unspoken fear, the fear of being unseen. When you step back, when you no longer fill the air with constant availability, you confront him with this fear. The silence becomes a canvas upon which he projects his fantasies, his regrets, his hunger. This is where obsession is born, not in noise, but in the tension of what is unsaid. The Stoics knew this art well, though they spoke of it in the language of self-sufficiency. Marcus Aurelius wrote of the mind that remains unshaken by the winds of another's approval. The woman who masters this stance is immovable. She understands that her value does not inflate or deflate based on the fluctuations of someone else's attention. She stands in the center of her own world, and men feel the gravity of that center. A man cannot possess what does not seek to be possessed, and that impossibility draws him closer. Here lies the paradox. The more you try to capture a man's mind with words, gifts, and ceaseless gestures, the more he takes them for granted. But when you withdraw, not in bitterness, but in sovereign stillness, he begins to notice the empty space where your energy once lived. Silence becomes the rarest sound he's ever heard, and he strains to hear it again. In this stillness, you are not rejecting him, you are recentering yourself. You allow him to feel the difference between presence and absence, and men, whether they admit it or not, are terrified of losing what once felt secure. This is not a game, though the untrained will mistake it for one. Games are played to manipulate. Mastery is exercised to reveal truth. And the truth is this: when you are too available, you rob a man of the journey. Desire lives in the gap between want and have. Close that gap too quickly, and the fire dies. But hold it open just wide enough for him to imagine crossing it, and the flame grows with every step he takes. Toward you, Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming whole within oneself, integrating the shadow and the light. A woman who makes the silent move is deep in her own individuation. She is not driven by the need to control a man, but by the need to remain in alignment with her truth. She recognizes when her energy is being overextended, when her giving has shifted from generosity to self-erasure, and in that moment she steps back, not to punish, but to protect the sacred ground of her own psyche. The modern world rewards constant visibility, but power is often found in the unseen. Mystery is the lifeblood of fascination. In your silence, you are not empty. You are full of meaning, that he must work to uncover. He will wonder what you are thinking, what you are doing, whether you are thinking of him at all. This wandering becomes a loop in his mind, an itch he cannot scratch, a question he cannot unask. That is the seed of obsession, and yet the most dangerous thing you could do is break the silence prematurely, just to soothe your own discomfort. Obsession requires patience. It requires trust in your own magnetism, trust that you do not need to chase in order to be chosen. Like the moon pulling the tide without touching the water, your presence, even when withdrawn, moves him in ways he cannot fully explain. If you can understand this, you will begin to see that the silent move is not merely about him at all. It is about you reclaiming the throne of your own mind, refusing to be a servant to your fears of abandonment. It is about recognizing that the most potent signal you can send is often the one you do not speak. There is a moment, quiet and almost imperceptibly, when a man begins to realize he no longer holds the entirety of your gaze. It unsettles him, though he may not admit it. The human psyche is deeply attuned to shifts in attention. It is an ancient survival instinct. In relationships, this instinct transforms into an unconscious alarm, a subtle tightening in the chest. When the energy that once flowed so freely begins to pull away. And yet, what he feels is not only loss, but also the awakening of the hunt to the masculine psyche, especially one bound by its own archetypal drives. Pursuit is not merely an act. It is a right. Jung observed that the anima, the feminine image in the male unconscious, is not static. She changes, evolves, withdraws, and reappears in new forms. When you withdraw, you activate this shifting image, stirring in him a longing not just for you as you are, but for the parts of you he feels slipping beyond his grasp. Your silence becomes a signal that there are still undiscovered realms within you, and men are drawn to what remains mysterious. You must understand that human desire is fueled by tension, and tension cannot exist in a field without polarity. If you are always there, always responding, always available, there is no polarity, only flat familiarity. The silent move reintroduces contrast, creating a rhythm between presence and absence. It is this rhythm, not constant attention, that binds his mind to yours. Without it, he becomes complacent. With it, he becomes captivated. The Stoics would call this detachment not cruelty, but discipline. Epictetus taught that the only true control we have is over our own will, our actions, our words, our inner life. When you choose to hold your tongue, to withhold your presence, you are practicing a higher discipline. You are teaching yourself that you are not compelled to give simply because someone desires you to. This is the essence of self-sovereignty, to give because it aligns with your truth, not because you fear what will happen if you don't. Psychologically, withdrawal changes the energy dynamic between two people. In trauma psychology, this can awaken a man's attachment patterns, especially if he carries unresolved wounds of neglect or abandonment. The secure man will approach this shift with curiosity and an eagerness to reconnect. The insecure man may respond with urgency, anxiety, even anger, as he feels his sense of control slipping. Yet in both cases, the space you create forces him to act, to move toward you rather than assuming you will always move toward him. And here lies another truth. The silent move does not work if it is merely a tactic. If your silence is laced with fear, resentment, or manipulation, it will not magnetize, it will repel. Men, even unconsciously, can sense the difference between a woman who is centered in her own being and one who is retreating in hope that absence will provoke love. The first is power, the second is desperation wearing a mask. The energy beneath the act is what determines its effect. Consider the archetype of the high priestess. In mythology and tarot, a figure of mystery, deep wisdom, and withheld knowledge. She is not hidden because she fears the world, but because she knows her worth cannot be accessed without effort, reverence, and readiness. In the same way, your silence is not an exile, but an invitation, an unspoken challenge for him to meet you at a deeper level, to earn what he once took for granted. This move also has a profound effect on your own psyche. In stepping back, you begin to notice where you had been overextending yourself, where your giving had become compulsive rather than conscious. You may realize that the constant flow of your energy was not a gift, but an unspoken bargain, one you hoped would keep him close. In reclaiming that energy, you break the bargain, and with it, the illusion that love must always be maintained through over-effort. Men are instinctively drawn to women who are not entirely decipherable, because mystery demands engagement. In an age of oversharing, where every thought is broadcast and every emotion is explained, restraint becomes rare, and rarity breeds value. When he cannot immediately decode your silence, he is forced into introspection. He wonders what you are thinking, where you are, whether you are still thinking of him. These questions loop in the mind like a song he cannot stop humming. Do not underestimate the potency of this. The male mind, once caught in the tension between desire and uncertainty, begins to feed upon its own projections. In your absence, you become larger, more vivid, more mythic in his imagination. And that is the paradox of human attraction. We often feel the deepest pull toward what we cannot fully hold. In truth, the silent move is less about making him obsessed and more about returning to the truth of your own center. His obsession, if it comes, is merely the echo of the magnetic field you create when you are no longer orbiting someone else's needs. This is the psychology of power, not force, not seduction, but gravity. There comes a point when the withdrawal is no longer just a shift in behavior. It becomes an energetic reorientation. The woman who once leaned forward now leans back, not in avoidance, but in sovereignty. This is where the silent move gains its full potency, when your absence is not a strategy you are enduring, but a state of being you embody with ease. It is then that he feels the deepest dissonance, because the rhythm between you has changed at its core. A man accustomed to a constant stream of affirmation feels the silence as an interruption to his inner narrative. He is no longer the unquestioned center of your emotional landscape. The attention he once received without effort is now something he must earn, and in that earning, his desire sharpens. Jung would call this the confrontation with the anima in her autonomous form. No longer a reflection of his ego's needs, she becomes a living force outside his control. This is the psychological earthquake beneath the obsession, the recognition that you exist fully without him, and that he has no dominion over your sense of worth. There is a deep archetypal pull in the image of the woman, who is both close enough to be desired and distant enough to be wondered about. She is the embodiment of Aphrodite's magnetism combined with Artemis's independence, beauty, and allure that does not beg for recognition, paired with a self-possession that needs no validation. In her silence, she becomes a mirror to his own soul, reflecting both his yearning and his inadequacies. Some men will rise to meet this mirror, others will run from it. Both reactions reveal more about him than about you. This is where the Stoic lesson of control returns with greater weight. Seneca warned against being ruled by passions that are inflamed by external forces. For the woman who holds her silence, the temptation will be strong to break it prematurely, to fill the space with words in order to soothe his discomfort or your own. But mastery lies in holding the line, in allowing the space to do its work. For the first time, he must wrestle with uncertainty, with not knowing exactly where he stands. That uncertainty is the forge in which desire is tempered. The psychology of attachment reveals something essential here. Most people operate in cycles of seeking closeness and creating distance. Those who are perpetually available collapse the cycle. They give closeness without the space, without the tension, without the anticipation that makes it meaningful. The silent move restores that cycle. It gives him the distance he needs to feel the pull of return. Without this oscillation, his attention will inevitably drift toward novelty elsewhere, for the human mind is wired to seek what is not immediately in hand. What is often misunderstood is that this is not about manipulation. Manipulation seeks to provoke a specific reaction. Mastery allows whatever reaction comes to simply be. If he moves toward you with greater intensity, it is because the space has revealed his desire. If he retreats further, it is because the space has revealed his disinterest. Either way, you have brought the truth to the surface without chasing it, without twisting yourself into shapes to extract it. In myth, the hero's journey always includes a descent, a time when the hero loses what he treasures most and must journey into the unknown to reclaim it. In your silence, you have become the catalyst for his descent. You remove the safety of constant reassurance, and in doing so, you force him into the wilderness of his own longing. There, he will either confront his shadows or turn away from them. The outcome is his to choose, but the initiation was yours. From the feminine perspective, this withdrawal is a form of individuation. It is the reclaiming of psychic territory. Once surrendered, it is the recognition that to be loved fully, you must first remain whole, not split into fragments to please another. In stepping back, you give him the gift of missing you, of remembering that your presence is not guaranteed. And in that remembering, the mind begins to weave stories, replay moments, imagine futures. This mental occupation is the essence of obsession. It is not born in your nearness, but in your absence. Yet this absence is not cold. It is the warmth of a hearth glimpsed from a distance, the knowledge that there is light and fire, but only for those who draw close with reverence. A man may feel this pull and not fully understand it. He may only know that life feels flatter when your energy is withdrawn. That is the quiet magic of the silent move. It does not demand to be noticed, yet it cannot be ignored. In the end, your silence speaks in a language older than words. It speaks to the primal recognition that value is not found in what is given endlessly, but in what is given with discernment. And once he feels the difference, the memory of it will linger, shaping his thoughts long after you have left the room. Over time, something begins to shift inside him, a slow, almost imperceptible turning of gears. At first, he may resist it, telling himself he doesn't need to think about you, that your quiet retreat is nothing. But the mind, when deprived of a constant stimulus, does not go blank. It fills the space with imagination, with projections, with all the unspoken questions that have nowhere else to go. And in the echo of your silence, those questions grow louder. He wonders if you are thinking of someone else, if you have already moved beyond him, if you ever cared as much as he assumed. These thoughts are not born from cruelty on your part, but from the natural reaction to absence. For millennia, human beings have been wired to notice what is missing, to give it more weight than what is present. Psychologists call this the negativity bias, but in the realm of attraction, it becomes something else entirely, a magnet. For attention, in Jungian terms, your silence awakens the shadow in him. The shadow contains all that is repressed, all that is denied, including vulnerability, inadequacy, and the fear of losing what he once held. By withdrawing, you force him to confront these hidden parts of himself. He may dress it up as curiosity, longing, or even frustration. But beneath those emotions lies something deeper, a confrontation with his own dependence on your energy. There is an archetype here as old as time. The muse who inspires precisely because she is not always attainable. The muse is not a servant to the artist. She exists for her own sake, her own creation, and the artist must rise to meet her. Your silent move places you in this role. You become a source of inspiration and desire precisely because you are not endlessly accessible. He must earn the moments of connection, and in earning them, they become sacred. The Stoics spoke often of the discipline of desire, of tempering the urge to grasp for what is not ours to hold. For the woman who practices the silent move, this discipline is mirrored. It is the discipline of not rushing to reassure, of not collapsing into his unease just to soothe him. It is the art of letting him feel the absence without running to fill it. In doing so, you teach him that your presence is a privilege, not an entitlement. Trauma psychology tells us that many men, especially those unaccustomed to deep self-reflection, will attempt to restore equilibrium by pulling you back into the familiar patterns. They may reach out more often, speak more sweetly, or try to provoke a reaction through withdrawal of their own. These are unconscious strategies to restore control over the dynamic. But the woman in her sovereignty does not respond from reflex. She moves only when it aligns with her truth, not from fear of losing him. Your silence also creates space for you to see clearly. Without the constant noise of his needs, you begin to notice your own. You may find that the person you were becoming in his presence was not the truest version of yourself, but a performance designed to maintain harmony. Now, in the quiet, you can feel the difference between love freely given and love extracted. And in that awareness, you reclaim your choice. Men are drawn to women who have an inner world richer than anything they can offer materially or emotionally. When you withdraw into that world, when you invest in your passions, your growth, your self-mastery, you'll become a living embodiment of the individuated feminine. Jung saw individuation as the ultimate goal of the psyche, to become whole within oneself, integrating both light and shadow. Your silence is not emptiness. It is a fertile space where you cultivate your own wholeness. And the paradox is that this very wholeness is what draws him back with such intensity. Men may be intrigued by beauty, charm, and affection, but they become obsessed with what they cannot fully consume. When he senses that your life is full, that your joy and peace are not contingent upon him, he experiences both attraction and an existential discomfort. You are not a puzzle he can solve. You are a landscape he can only explore, never own. This is why the silent move works, not as a manipulation, but as a revelation. It reveals the truth of your dynamic without you having to explain it. If he values you, he will move toward you with greater clarity and purpose. If he does not, he will drift. And that too is a gift, for it frees you from investing further in a connection that cannot meet you where you are. Your absence, then, is not a void, but a mirror. It shows him who he is when you are not feeding. his sense of importance. It shows you who you are when you are not pouring yourself into someone else. And in that mutual revelation lies the foundation for either a deeper union or a clean separation, both outcomes rooted in truth. What unsettles him most is not merely that you are gone from his immediate reach, but that you seem untouched by his absence. The male ego, in its less conscious form, clings to the belief that a woman will always orbit him, emotionally tethered, no matter the distance. But when he sees you standing in your own light, calm, composed, perhaps even more radiant, something in him fractures. He must now contend with the possibility that you were never his possession at all, only a presence he was privileged to experience. This realization is the crack through which obsession slips in. Men are not drawn to what they fully own. They are drawn to what evokes the hunger to return. In Jungian archetypal language, you have shifted from the accessible lover to the enigmatic queen, the sovereign figure who cannot be commanded, only invited. And because the queen governs herself, her absence is never an accident. It is an act of alignment, a restoration of balance, a reminder that the throne belongs to her alone. In this way, your silence becomes an unspoken challenge, not the shallow challenge of playing hard to get, but the deep, spiritual challenge of requiring him to grow in order to meet you. Men rarely admit it, but their greatest fascination often lies with the women who reveal, without words, that they cannot be reached by the same tactics that work on everyone else. The silent move removes the familiar roots of conquest, forcing him into new territory. It is here, in the unknown, that obsession thrives. But you must hold steady. The human mind craves resolution, and his instinct will be to provoke you into breaking the silence, to pull you back into the old rhythm where he feels secure. He may reach out with sudden warmth, or, conversely, with cold detachment meant to test your resolve. Either way, he is searching for proof that you still revolve around him. The disciplined woman does not yield. She understands that his discomfort is part of the process, not to be soothed prematurely, but to be allowed to transform him. The Stoics would call this endurance. Marcus Aurelius wrote of standing firm, unmoved by either praise or blame, holding fast to the inner citadel. In the context of the silent move, this means you do not measure your worth by his response, nor do you adjust your course to draw him back more quickly. You remain in your center, knowing that your magnetism is strongest when it is not performed, but lived. There is a deeper layer here, one rooted in attachment and trauma psychology. Many men are unconsciously replaying early relational wounds, seeking in women the reassurance they never consistently received in childhood. When you step back, it triggers these old anxieties. For some, this will awaken urgency and pursuit. For others, defensiveness and withdrawal. Either way, your silence brings the truth into sharp focus. You see who he becomes when the easy supply of validation is no longer there, and that clarity is invaluable. This is also when your own shadows may rise. You may feel the impulse to reach out, to explain yourself, to assure him that nothing is wrong. That impulse often comes not from love, but from your own fear of loss or rejection. The woman, in her individuation process, recognizes this, and does not let the fear govern her. She understands that if silence ends, it must be because the moment is right, not because her anxiety could not bear the space. From the mythic perspective, this phase mirrors the Persephone archetype. The descent into the underworld, Persephone, leaves the surface not in rebellion, but in transformation. She returns to the upper world changed, carrying with her a mystery no one can touch. When you withdraw, you are taking your own descent into self-reflection, self-nourishment, and self-possession. And when you re-emerge, whether into his life or beyond it, you are no longer the same woman who left. The beauty of this is that your return, if it comes, will not be desperate. It will be a choice, deliberate and sovereign. He will feel that difference instantly. The woman who comes back of her own accord, without being pulled, is far more compelling than the one who could not stay away. And if you choose not to return at all, your silence will become the defining echo in his memory. The chapter that never closed. The door that stayed half open in his mind. It is here, in this uncertainty, that obsession plants its deepest roots. The mind cannot let go of what it cannot fully resolve. And when you are both present enough to be real, yet distant enough to remain a question, you occupy a space in his psyche that few can dislodge. The longer the silence stretches, the more it reshapes the landscape of his thoughts. At first, he may have told himself stories to protect his pride, that you were busy, distracted, or going through a phase. But time erodes those easy explanations. Eventually, the truth begins to seep in. You are not waiting for him, and your life has not paused in his absence. This realization stirs a primal discomfort, because it challenges the narrative many men hold deep in their unconscious, that the woman will remain available until he decides otherwise. This is where the real pull begins. Your absence has now moved from a momentary disruption to a new reality. He starts to notice the places where your energy once filled the air, the way you laughed at certain moments, the insight you brought into conversations, the warmth you gave without asking for anything in return. The absence of these things is not neutral. It is felt like the missing note in a familiar melody, the gap that makes the song incomplete. In Gungian terms, you have stepped out of his conscious frame of control and into the realm of the numinous, the mysterious, magnetic unknown that the psyche cannot fully grasp but cannot stop reaching for. The anima, when withdrawn, becomes even more potent in the male unconscious. She appears in dreams, in fleeting moments of daydream, in the unguarded thoughts before sleep. You have become not just a person, but a symbol, the embodiment of something he cannot name, yet cannot dismiss. It is important to understand that this symbolic transformation happens only when your silence is authentic, rooted in self rather than performance. The feminine energy that withdraws to manipulate will eventually collapse under its own tension, because it requires constant calculation. But the feminine energy that withdraws to preserve her wholeness radiates without effort. This is the silent gravity that bends his attention without you having to lift a finger. The Stoics would see this as an exercise in temperance, the ability to withhold, not from scarcity, but from strength. You are not punishing him. You are honoring yourself. You are choosing to live in alignment with the truth that you are not a commodity to be consumed at will, but a force to be met with presence and reciprocity. As days or weeks pass, he may feel compelled to close the gap. The drive for resolution is a powerful psychological force. Human beings are uncomfortable with unfinished stories, and the mind will work endlessly to complete them. If he feels that the connection with you is unresolved, he will revisit it repeatedly, looking for meaning, replaying memories, scrutinizing moments for signs he missed. This is not simply sentimentality, it is the cognitive loop of obsession. In some cases, he will attempt to re-enter your life with gestures of charm, humor, or vulnerability. These are not inherently bad. In fact, They can be the beginnings of a renewed dynamic if his intentions are sincere. But sincerity is revealed not in the first approach, but in what follows. Does he now meet you at your level? Does he offer the reciprocity your silence made necessary? Or does he merely seek to pull you back into the old rhythm, where his comfort outweighs your boundaries? The beauty of the silent move is that it forces this truth into the open. It gives you the clarity that constant interaction obscures. When you are always available, you cannot see how someone behaves in your absence. But when you step back, their response tells you everything. The man who values you will rise. The man who only valued your attention will fade. And as for you, this time has deepened you. Your silence has been a vessel, holding not only the space between you, but also the space within you. You have heard your own thoughts without interruption, felt your own needs without filtering them through his presence. In Jung's language, you have integrated another piece of your shadow, the part of you that once feared withdrawal would mean loss. Now you know that withdrawal can also mean preservation, empowerment, and truth. By the time he realizes that his thoughts have circled back to you again and again, he may not even be able to trace when the shift occurred. That is the quiet genius of this move. It does not announce itself. It simply works in the background, turning presence into memory, and memory into longing. At a certain point, the silence ceases to feel like a pause in the story. It becomes the story. He is no longer reacting to something you did or said. He is reacting to the ongoing reality of you existing beyond his reach. This is where the psychology shifts from mild curiosity to deep fixation. Not because you are playing a role, but because you have genuinely stepped into a life that does not center around him, and that independence glows in a way he cannot ignore. Men often imagine that desire is sustained by proximity, that the more they are around a woman, the more they will want her. But proximity breeds familiarity, and familiarity, if unbroken, dulls the edge of longing. The silent move shatters that pattern. It reintroduces the ancient dynamic of the quest. The masculine drive to move towards something valuable and rare, something that will not simply fall into his lap. Jung would say that in this moment, you cease being merely a figure in his outer world and become a myth in his inner world. Myths do not fade easily. They take root in the unconscious and influence thought, dream, and action in ways the ego cannot fully control. The effect is amplified because the silence is not filled with signals from you. There are no posts crafted to provoke, no strategic crumbs to keep him circling. In this way, you deny him the easy reassurance that you still linger in his orbit. His imagination must work harder, and the harder it works, the more vivid you become in his mind. The absence becomes fertile ground for projection. He may imagine you laughing with someone else, exploring new worlds, living with a joy that has nothing to do with him. Each image stirs a mixture of desire and regret, drawing him deeper into the loop. From the Stoic perspective, this is where your discipline is most tested. It is tempting to check in, to see if he has noticed, to break the stillness with a moment of contact. But every time you resist, you reaffirm your sovereignty. Marcus Aurelius spoke of standing unmoved, like a rock against which the waves break, not out of coldness, but out of strength. Your silence is not the absence of care. It is the presence of self-respect. And here lies another truth. Obsession is not only about what is withheld from him, it is also about what is restored to you. In reclaiming your time, your focus, your emotional energy, you begin to fill the spaces he once occupied with other sources of meaning. Perhaps you rediscover old passions, deepen your friendships, or simply allow yourself to be still without the constant pull of someone else's needs. This shift in your energy is palpable, and whether he sees it directly or only senses it from a distance, it heightens his awareness that you are moving forward without him. Attachment psychology shows us that this creates a powerful contrast. The more he perceives your life as vibrant and full without his involvement, the more it challenges his unconscious sense of indispensability. The ego resists being replaced, and the thought of you thriving independently can stir an urgent need to re-establish connection, not always from love, but often from the need to reaffirm identity. Still, the result is the same. He turns toward you, drawn by the magnetic combination of distance and vitality. You, however, are no longer in the same position you once were. The silent move is not a circle that brings you back unchanged. It is a spiral that elevates you to a new vantage point. From here, you see more clearly. You understand that the man who truly aligns with you will not require you to abandon your center to keep his attention. He will meet you there, in the space you have claimed as your own. For some men, this moment will be the catalyst for transformation. They will rise, not only to close the distance, but to become worthy of the place they once held in your life. For others, the discomfort will drive them away, and they will seek easier, less challenging sources of validation. Either way, the silent move will have revealed the truth, and truth is worth far more than temporary comfort. The most potent part of all this is that you did not force anything. You did not plead, persuade, or perform. You simply withdrew into your own fullness, and in doing so, you became both memory and mystery. He cannot stop thinking of you, not because you demanded it, but because the human psyche is wired to return to what it cannot fully resolve. Eventually, the silence stops being something he notices in moments. It becomes the backdrop to his days, like a low, steady hum beneath his conscious awareness. Your absence threads itself through his routine. The mind is a restless thing. It does not like unresolved stories. And so, without your words to guide him, without your presence to anchor him, he begins to build his own narratives. In these stories, you are at once the woman he knew and the woman he imagines. A fusion of reality and projection that feels more vivid than either alone. This is the deep territory of obsession, where longing is less about what is and more about what might have been. Jung understood this well. The anima in the male psyche often takes on idealized qualities, shaped not by who the woman truly is, but by what she symbolizes. When you step back, you allow that symbolic transformation to occur. You become a figure of mystery, an unanswered question, a reminder of a moment in his life when the air between you was alive with possibility. The paradox is that this is only possible because you have genuinely reclaimed your center. If your silence were an act born of fear or need, its energy would carry tension, and tension seeks resolution too quickly. But when your silence is an expression of self-possession, when it is rooted in the knowledge that you are whole regardless of his response, it becomes magnetic. It draws not by force, but by gravity. The Stoics would frame this as the highest form of control, mastery over the self. Epictetus taught that freedom is found not in controlling others, but in governing your own impulses. Each day you remain steady in your absence, you strengthen the muscle of detachment. You prove to yourself that you can desire connection without needing to cling to it, that you can love without abandoning yourself. This is the power that both attracts and unsettles him, the realization that you want him, perhaps, but you do not need him. And while his thoughts circle you, you are no longer circling him. Your focus has turned inward and outward, inward to your own growth, outward to a life expanding beyond the confines of his attention. You may notice how your energy feels lighter, how your mind is clearer without the constant preoccupation with his moods or responses. This is not just a byproduct of the silent move. It is its hidden gift. By stepping back, you create not only the space for him to feel your absence, but the space for you to feel your own presence. In attachment terms, you have shifted from anxious or overextended patterns into a secure stance. This doesn't mean you feel nothing for him. It means you are no longer defined by his nearness or distance. And when a man encounters a woman in this state, it forces a reckoning within him. He can no longer rely on the easy pull of dependency. He must now meet you as an equal, or risk losing you entirely. Some men will rise to this, not out of panic, but out of genuine recognition of your value. They will reach out with clarity, offering not just words, but consistent action. Others will linger at the edges, unable to fully approach, yet unwilling to let go. For these men, the obsession may never resolve, and you will remain a permanent fixture in their inner world. But for you, the choice will be different now. You will see that the silent move was never about bending him to your will. It was about returning to your own. His obsession, if it comes, is a side effect, not the goal. The real goal has always been alignment with your worth, with your truth, with the life that continues to unfold regardless of who walks beside you. This is why the woman who masters this art is so powerful. She does not need to shout, to demand, or to chase. Her absence speaks, her stillness commands, and her return, if it comes, is a gift freely given. She knows that love born in freedom is worth more than love sustained by fear, and she knows that the man who cannot stand in her silence is not the man who will stand beside her in her storm. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase. She chooses.